There are some dogs that want to be alpha, that want to be the leader of the pack. All dogs instinctively get more protective around the evening time, especially if the sun's already down. Especially when it comes to fighting a dog, there's so much that goes into that, right?
Today on the show we have Adam Rushing. He has an eclectic background. He's a veteran in the US Army Infantry. He works as in a process engineering, and he is a dog trainer, rehab for dogs, runs a charity. The reason that I found Adam is that basically I was going on YouTube looking for how to defend yourself against dogs, and I came across this really long comment where Adam basically broke down the psychology of a dog and how you should think the dog's being aggressive. And so that's just I'm really excited to bring him here so you can learn from this. You never know when you might need it. At least it'll be a fascinating topic for you. So thank you, Adam, for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun. I like talking dogs. It's about the only thing I consider myself an expert in.
I just love that forest you've got behind you there. That is just truly beautiful.
Yeah, it's the pleasures of living in Alaska, my friend.
Do you have any wild animals coming up scaring you?
So we have a moose, a cow moose. She likes to drop twins every year, and she likes our property. She used to come up when it's really, really cold, 40, 50 below, whatever. I think we lose a little bit of heat out of our bedroom window. She would come up and circle up there and make a bed for the night, every night, just about, it seemed. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Do you have any dogs that protect you from this moose?
We do. We have one that likes to put himself between us and the moose. Moose will kill a dog in a heartbeat, so it's not something we want to do. But we got a Shepherd Malamute mix, German Shepherd Malamute mix, and he kind of surprised me. We had one cow a few years ago trying to break into our dog yard. I got a 4x4 posts and a chain link fence to wrap our dog yard around. Or wrapping around her dog yard, and she was butting it. I assume the only thing I could figure, she had a baby with her, had a calf. Our dog started barking at her, and usually the moose that live around this area, because it is a community, there's multiple people, right? They'll just wander off if the dogs start barking. They'll go into the tree line. For some reason, she was banging on it, and he come out of the house and was right up against the fence. Scared her off pretty good, so it worked. But if there wasn't a fence between them, I'd have no doubt he'd be a dead dog right now.
So I like dogs as well. For me, giving my experience with dogs, which isn't that much, there's certain things that I look out for from a danger perspective. My idea is that the most dangerous type of dog is the silent dog, because the most likely way it's going to attack you. If it's going to attack you, it doesn't need to bark. It's just going to come and go for you. So barking, in a sense, seems like a good thing because the dog still wants to communicate something. So you have options there. And from what I gather from your amazing comment is that I'll put a link to that comment, by the way, on the video. People can read it. Is that dogs behave differently when they're 2 or 3, especially 3 because they're a pack, and the psychology changes. They're trying to one up each other and this kind of stuff. So I guess maybe you can just expand on how you got into the dogs. And
expand on what? I'm sorry.
How you got into the whole working with dogs, and then how to protect yourself against dogs.
Okay, so as far as getting into dogs, I grew up in farm and ranch country in Colorado. We always had dogs. It was just there. My mom was really good with dogs, so I learned a lot from her as a child. The first time I got into actually thinking about training dogs was actually working with a guy on a ranch, and he had a border collie. And it was the most amazing thing to this day that I've ever seen. I think I was, 14 years old maybe at the time. He was herding sheep with his border collie. He had a couple of them, but there was one that he had that was his, they were peas in a pod. They had a connection that I've only had with one dog in all my life. He trained her with hand signals, so he didn't have to talk to her. If you're moving 1,000 sheep and she's a quarter mile away, she can't be listening to you, right? So you got to have big macro hand signals for her to follow. Well, she was sitting next to him. She was with us. The three of us were there, and he saw a little baby sheep wandering away from the herd on the far side, and he did some hand signals. I don't remember what they were, but he basically told her, "Hey, there's a little baby over there. Go get it. Calves are breaking away or whatever." She hopped up on the backs of the sheep, and she was so fast she ran across the backs of the because that was the shortest point between, or the shortest distance, right, between point A and B was a straight line. She hopped up on the backs of the sheep and ran across and got the baby back over to its mama and all that. I was so impressed because every dog I'd seen works their way through or runs around the outside. So it was obvious this guy knew what he was doing, and I got in with him a little bit. He was also our horse trainer, or the horse trainer for that ranch. So he was worked with all the animals, but primarily dogs and horses. Which there is a lot of correlation between. If anybody out there knows horses, they're prey animal. Dogs are a predator, so there are some differences, but there is a lot of correlation with the training.
Well, such what kind of correlations?
So one of the biggest is having to have a leader. So dogs have to have a leader in their pack, right? They don't understand any other way. If it's just you and them, then let's just say it's one person and one dog. That's the pack, right? So the leader has to dictate when feeding happens, where we're going, how fast we're going, whatever. If you, as the human, are not presenting yourself as a leader, then by default, the dog says, well, I guess I'm the leader, right? There has to be one. There is no other way. And it can't be sometimes you're the boss over here, sometimes I'm the boss over here. It has to be 100% the human is the boss. I like to say if we were stuck out in the woods, probably be better to follow them, let them lead, right? But we live in a society where there's people, there's laws, there's crosswalks, there's traffic, there's all kinds of things. So we have to be that leader for them. They don't know any other way. Well, a horse pack, a horse herd is the same exact way. There's always a leader. Sometimes with horses, there's two leaders. There's the leader for disciplining the herd might not be the leader when they migrate from one place to another, if that makes sense. So they might be different that way, but there's always somebody that the rest of the herd knows they have to follow, given a scenario.
Yeah, I've had very limited experience of horses, but dogs. That's really interesting what you're saying. How do you communicate to a dog that you're the leader? Because a dog is basically physically stronger, faster, more durable than us. So, I mean, I always find it amazing that this big German Shepherd that we have, which is about 30 to 40% wider than normal German Shepherds, it's got amazing strength. I mean, it just when it wants to do something that requires energy, it just always kind of shakes me a little bit because it's often quite docile, and I'm amazed like this thing obeys me. It's just like how is that? How is that possible? That such a strong animal is sort of almost afraid of me.
Right. And he should be, right? So we've not afraid, but respectful, right? Just like you with let's say your father, right? You didn't want to disappoint him. You didn't want to get the spanking or the grounding or whatever. You had that fear of your father. It's not an unhealthy fear, right? Fear is a good thing because it comes out of a place of respect. Now, if your father was a drunken abuser, that's going to be a different type of fear, right? That's not the kind of fear we want to have in our dogs. So, but it all comes down to the mentality of the dog. There are some dogs that want to be alpha, that want to be the leader of the pack. Just like, let's say, leader of a country, it's a very minute person or population segment that wants that role, right? There's not very many people that want to be the president of the United States, right? That want to run a country. A lot of people are just like, myself included, I want nothing to do with that, right? It's just not for me. That's the way dog mentality is the same, right? Sometimes you're going to come across ones that want that alpha role, that want to challenge for that, and you're going to come across 90, 95% of them that don't want that. It's a lot easier in a lot of ways when you know what you're doing to convince the dog that wants the role not to have the role than it is for it's easier on the dog. Let me back up. It's easier on the dog if you got one that wants the alpha role to convince him not to be there than it is to take a dog that wants nothing to do with it and by our lack of leadership essentially tell them by default that they are the leader. Does that make sense?
Yeah, pretty much.
It,
So when you said
the,
like in a wood situation, you'd want the dog to be a leader, what advantage would having the dog in a survival situation in the wood give you?
well, what I mean by that is, yeah, like we're still, let's say you crash in an airplane and you're out in the middle of nowhere, right? Or you're just living out in the middle of nowhere, and it is literally only the two of you to survive. That dog is going to be able to tell you. They're going to be able to see and smell prey that we can't, right? They're going to hear it. They're going to be able to see, smell, and hear danger before we do. They're going to recognize that because it's instinctual for them, right? It's a lot more instinctual because we've been living in cities for so long. It's instinctual for us to walk down a sidewalk and not get hit by a car, right? That is not instinctual for a dog. A dog's instincts draw them to the woods to hunt, to chase, all that kind of stuff. So if we were in that situation, it might be better to just let the dog go. Now, if you've got like a Yorkie and you're out in the middle of the woods, probably not the same thing, right? It's the same mindset that the dog has. A Yorkie has the same brain, the same instincts that a German Shepherd would have. They still have the desire to chase, to hunt, to kill, to whatever they want to do. That instinctual drive is still there, but they've been bred down so much that obviously they're going to be pretty horrible at it, right? As we all would if we just, randomly landed in the middle of the woods and had to survive, dog or human. Take them out of the city, put them in the woods, and it's going to be difficult to survive. But that's why I say it's the things that they have, the attributes that they have, are much better than ours, and that's one of the first uses that dogs ever had with humans was hunting. Dog or humans when they first started domesticating dogs, that's what they were using them for, was chasing down prey, finding and chasing down prey. And then they would get them, cornered. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Old Yeller, but Old
Actually, I
Yeller,
have seen it. Yes.
yeah. So they used the dogs to chase the hogs into a ravine where there was no escape, and then they got them up on top of them and killed them, shot them, or whatever. That's a very primitive form of hunting. It goes all the way back to sticks and stones when we were using those for hunting. But yeah, so that's how dogs first came to be. That's their instincts, right? They all come from wolves. So if we are stuck in that situation, yeah, probably better let them lead.
I wonder how they managed to tame the first wolf.
So the only thing I could figure on that, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know, but the the only thing I can figure is the dogs probably started hanging around because of human scraps, wasted food, bones or whatever. I mean, we used bone marrow and everything back then, but there's always some sort of scrap, right? And I maybe the dog started hanging around with that and started getting used to people, started getting accustomed to people. Wild animals have an ability to do that, right? To get accustomed to people. The the cow moose I was talking about with you earlier, I think that was before we started recording, but we have a cow moose that comes around frequently through our yard. If you go out in the woods to a moose that isn't around humans, you get within, if you're being quiet, I'm going to say not even necessarily sneaky, but just not being loud and obnoxious. 50 yards is about as close as they'll let you get, give or take, right? It's going to be dependent on the moose, but the cow that we got here, I can get 10 yards from her and she's not upset, right? Even if she has her babies, like I wouldn't push it any more than that because I like living. But the ones that are around humans a lot can kind of they get a different safety zone, let's call it. They get a different feel. They're like, okay, well, I've never been hurt at 50 yards, so it's probably okay if they come into 20 yards, right? Something to that effect. So that's the only thing I could figure is the dog just started getting used to humans, and then somebody who likes critters started, feeding it and bringing it in, and then eventually put it on a leash and started breeding the ones that aren't as vicious. I don't know how much people know about wolves, but they are vicious animals. And there's a story about that we can talk about when I was handing on a ranch in Montana. But in order to domesticate a wolf or a dog or whatever, it has to not want to kill you first, right? So that the only thing I can figure is the first one that they grabbed a hold of might have been kicked out of his pack for one reason or another, was using humans, following humans as a survival mechanism, and then just kind of became more and more docile over the years and had babies that did the same. And, selective breeding, we'll call it, even though they were doing it on their own. But you're breeding ones that are used to humans that are more, how do I say that, more tolerant of human presence. And then, yeah, one thing leads to another, and you got a critter for a pet.
If there was like a Mad Max scenario, that would be quite a good skill to have, the ability to tame wild animals,
Yeah,
to be a
I'd
force
like to have a
multiplier.
silverback. Sorry, I cut you off there. I've always thought having a silverback gorilla would be the best. They could carry everything you need.
Yeah, but I mean, he might not protect you that well. I mean, probably better with a goat or something like that. I mean, or a ram,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that can
for sure.
headbutt and also give you
Right.
lots of milk.
Yep. You can survive off of goat's milk.
I drink it most days here in Ukraine.
Oh, really? It's hard to find over here. Everything's cow's milk, but you pretty much have to grow your own to get goat's milk around here. Low outside in the lower 48 or whatever, I guess it's in some of the grocery stores there, but I don't know of it being a farmer's market maybe, but not commercially available up here.
Yeah, we have a friend here in Ukraine. He gives us a bottle this size of goat's milk every day.
Oh my
Just
goodness.
sometimes we get it and it's like lukewarm, or warmer than lukewarm, and it's like drinking, like, it just tastes the same as supermarket milk, but it doesn't have any chemical taste to it, you know? And it's
Right.
just,
Yep.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. You don't need to be pasteurized when it's only just come out from the udder.
Yeah, it's pasteurization and homogenization. That's all just for shelf life. That's all it's for. Kills a lot of the vitamins and stuff in it. But with a goat too, they don't have to get pregnant every year to have milk, right? So like with dairy cows, they get pregnant and then you're milking them, and then eventually they stop producing the milk after their child, their baby, would have not needed it anymore. 6 months down the road, whatever, I don't know. I'm not a dairy farmer. But with goats, as long as you're milking them, they don't ever dry up. They just keep producing milk. So they can have one baby and just keep producing milk as long as you're doing it. So that's probably why your buddy's giving you milk like that. Just keep her producing.
Mhm.
That's awesome, though.
Let's go. Let's go back to dogs. So,
Oh, yeah, dogs.
what signs? Say you're just, I guess, but we're talking about stray dogs here, or wild dogs, because domesticated dogs are, there's very low risks there because it's been around humans so long. So, what for you? At what point are you afraid when you meet a stray dog? What's the danger signs?
So a lot of it's the body language. If a dog has no interest in you, he's going to look at you. Let's say you're talking about stray dogs, right? Stray dogs are almost always moving. They're going from one place to another. Let's cover that scenario first. Moving from one place to another. I guess another scenario would be if they're denned up somewhere and you're approaching their den, right? So let's cover the migrating dog first. If they if they don't see you as a threat or food, then they're going to look at you look away, and just keep right on trucking. Does that make sense? They're not
Yep.
gonna they're not gonna focus on you for more than a second or two. So that video where we met, the guy said body language. Dogs are experts. He referred back to dogs being experts in reading body language, right? They don't talk to each other, so they have to rely on body language. If you are threatening to them, then they will respond one of two ways. They're going to run away or they're going to fight, right? One of two ways. But if you're not threatening, if you're just walking down the road and you've got a dog with you and he doesn't want to eat your dog for whatever reason, attack your dog or attack you, then he's just not going to pay any attention to you and he's going to go. So if a dog turns and focuses on you, that's going to send up a red flag right away. And you deal with that immediately, right? So that you don't wind up in a bad situation. You're less likely to wind up in a bad situation. The As far as the aggression goes, like you mentioned earlier, the dog bark versus the non-barking dog, right? Which one was more dangerous? If a dog wants to attack you, he's in hunt mode, right? He's hunting you is what he's doing, or your little buddy, your little dog that you got walking on the leash next to you. There is no dog in the world that is a successful hunter that barks at his prey while he's stalking it, right? They just don't make any noise.
Yep.
So if a dog is barking at you, that's a good sign. So stop where you're at, maybe find a different route. Don't continue forward because that the barking is a warning system, right? The dog is instinctively, it's a dog's job to let his pack know something is different. It could be a squirrel come by because they instinctively hunt small mammals, right? Or small critters. Sometimes they'll hunt iguanas and whatnot, but typically speaking, they hunted small game. So squirrels, rabbits, birds, things like that. So sometimes it's saying, hey, there's food nearby. Sometimes it's saying, hey, there's a threat nearby. But their barking is to let the rest of their pack know that they need your attention, basically. So when the dog is barking, it's a warning system to you, to whoever is not their pack, not a member of their pack. It's a warning system for you to back off. So in an effort to avoid the danger altogether, if he's not behind a fence, if he's a free roaming dog, then just back off, and then you don't get in a fight to begin with, right? There's some people that'll say never let the dog challenge you. You always challenge a dog, you push back. Why? If you can turn around and leave, you just won the dog fight you weren't in, right? Dogs are much less, especially modern day dogs, they're much less aggressive towards humans and they're much more aggressive towards other dogs. So if you're out walking your dog, and that was the video that we watched, he showed a clip, and that's exactly what happened. A dog came out and attacked her dog. It didn't attack her, but it attacked her dog. And she was just walking through an alleyway. The dog let him get past, and it approached from behind, which is how dogs fight, right? Or how they attack, how they charge. Very, very seldom will a dog charge you head on, unless there's caveats to everything. The dog will approach you head on in an aggressive manner if you are approaching his den, his home, whatever, and he feels he needs to defend that. He will approach you head on in that case. But if he's hunting you, he's not going to hunt you head on. He's going to come up from behind. If you've ever watched a wolf pack hunt a deer or elk or whatever, they get behind them and they just basically outrun them because they're distance runners. The animal gets winded and gets tired, and that's when they attack. But it's always from behind. It's never from the front. Just less danger that way for them, right? It's a smart way to hunt. So if the dog is hunting you, he's going to most likely come up from behind you, maybe off to the side, 45 off to the side or whatever, but it's going to be behind you. The the dog that's in front of you, especially if they're barking, isn't that big of a concern. Just don't continue on because again, that's their warning system. If you push back through that when you don't have to, you are risking the warning to turn into active aggression.
So, have you ever been attacked by a dog?
Yes. I was attacked by a collie when I was a kid riding my bike from my house to my aunt's. I was attacked by a mutt. I have no idea what it was. Same thing, riding a bicycle. I've had countless encounters when I'm working with dogs, training them on a leash or whatever. I can't even tell you how many times. And when I was a kid, we being my mother, rescued a wolf hybrid, shepherd wolf, I believe, from the local shelter. And there was a moment in time he challenged me, and it was an all out fight. That one I saw coming, but the blind attacks where you don't see them coming, usually you're moving quickly, like on a bicycle, or you have a dog with you, or something that engages their prey drive. And so, if I could break away for just a second, there's three drives that drive every dog. Everything that stimulates a dog falls under one of these three big branches. One is a defense drive. So a high defense drive is a dog that fights you on a drop of a hat, right? They want to protect their pack. So think of a good example is be like your Rottweilers, right? Your gladiator type breeds that will defend. Akitas are another great example. The Russians have a very good dog called a Caucasian Ovcharka, which Ovcharka, I guess, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, just means sheepdog. So you could look up Caucasian sheepdog; it would say the same. Big, defensive dog. There's a bunch of them out there, but usually flock guardian dogs transfer into that. They have a higher defense drive. So you got defense drive. You have a pack drive. So a high pack drive wants a big family. So think of your golden retrievers, your Labradors. They like their family, and that's what. So your livestock guardian dogs tend to have a high pack drive and a high prey or a defense drive. The defense drive keeps them near their family as well. They don't chase things. So the prey drive is what causes them to want to chase. The dogs that run the Iditarod up here, Iditarod mushing dogs, that's the prey drive that causes them to want to do that. So anytime anything moves, wiggles, whether it's squirrels, chickens, that's why chickens get attached or attacked so much. Not just the fact that everything on earth loves chicken, it just tastes awesome, but the movements that they have, they're very quick, jerky movements, and that kind of stuff engages that prey drive hardcore. So the prey drive is what you have to concern yourself with more than anything. The defense drive, a lot of people say, well, it's a high defense drive dog, right? So it's more likely to attack. That's not necessarily the case, especially not with good leadership. But that's not necessarily the case because you can disengage, and a high defense drive dog will stop. They won't keep pursuing you, if that makes sense. When we were in Macedonia, I was deployed to Macedonia for a while, and they have a lot of folks that are still living hand to mouth. You know, it's a third world country. It was anyway, bombed into a third world country, second world maybe, but they were growing all of their own groceries. And there was a guy who had a herd of sheep, and he had some really good dogs. And I couldn't tell you what the breeds were. Uh, I don't know if they had selective breeds back then, but you know, another country has different types of dogs sometimes, especially when it comes to working dogs that you just don't see in America. So I was 18, 19, whatever at the time, and I'd been around dogs, working with dogs probably for 8 to 10 years at that point before I joined the military, just because I grew up on farms and ranches. And so I knew about the guardian dog, and he put himself between us and the sheep and growled and barked us up against a hillside. And one of the guys I was with was from Puerto Rico, never dealt with dogs that weren't aggressive or anything in his life. He had a legit fear of dogs. And he was a good guy, but he was trying to trying to put a round in the chamber of his M16. He was going to take the dog out. I'm like, whoa, 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 stop, stop, stop. We don't need to shoot this guy's dog. His dog's doing exactly what he's supposed to do, right? And so I just backed us up further. And the two guys, it was a team of three that was doing the patrol, myself and two other guys. One was from Hawaii with no dog experience, and one from Puerto Rico with only negative dog experience. And so I put myself between them and this dog, and this dog put himself between us and the flock. And as the shepherd goes by, he's going from left to right. Not that that's relevant to the story, but he's going by over here. He waves, I wave at him. He lets all of his sheep get by, and he just gives a whistle. That dog turned around, went right back over to him. That dog was just holding us there. He wasn't chasing us or trying to kill us, but he would have had we not, relinquished a little bit of ground and just stood there, right? Had we turned and ran,
Why
he
didn't
wouldn't
why
have
didn't the
pursued us.
why didn't the farmer call it back immediately once he saw some of the other guys were afraid?
Because you don't want to untrain your dog. His
Right.
dog is doing exactly what his dog was trained to do. And anybody that knows dogs realized that. And so I'm just glad I was there that day. And then we talked about dogs for the rest of the march we had that day. So I don't know what would have happened. The dog might have gotten shot had I not been there. I'm not saying I'm some hero or nothing. I'm just saying that was how scared that dude from Puerto Rico was. He was, again, we're infantry soldiers, and he was so scared he's having trouble putting the mag into his M16. He was shaking, so he was definitely in fight or flight mode, or getting there anyway. But he told us later on he'd had some really, really bad experiences as a child with dogs, stray dogs, in Puerto Rico, been attacked multiple times, and pretty much just said, I'm going to shoot any dog instead of suffering that again. But anyway, so yeah, you don't want to untrain your dog. If he did that every time the dog recognizes a threat, or every other time, then the dog's not going to know exactly, okay, should I protect against this one? Should I not? What's going on? Now, had he, again, his dog was very well trained dog. Most of those dogs in those countries they're either really, really good, or they're really, really, really bad, just kind of depending on how much human interaction they've had, right? But if most dogs that work with humans on a day-to-day basis, herding or protecting or traveling with humans, getting out and seeing things and do it, they're very, very good dogs as far as the controllability that the owner has of them. So I wasn't concerned about that at all. Again, been around it my whole life, right? The only thing I was concerned about, to be honest, was my partners, the fellow soldiers I was with. The the dog that backed us into the corner, there was two other dogs that came over of varying sizes, but they were smaller. And as the two dogs approached, they were flanking him. He was facing us head on, right? He had us pushed up against the mountain. He turned as the dogs were kind of flanking him on either side. He turned and he bark, bark, kind of like that, just real quick. And they came to a stop right behind him. So he told him right there, hey, don't attack or whatever, right? And they came in and they stopped. It was very obvious that big dog that had first approached us, that he was in charge of those. One of them looked more like a herding dog than a flock guardian. So I don't know that his primary objective was guardianship, but he might have just been there as backup or whatever. A lot of those dogs, especially in those country, are multi-use. They'll be a herding dog and a protection dog. We in the West, we have gone away from that because it's really, really difficult to get a dog to be a protection dog and a herding dog, because the herding is your prey instinct as well, right? The desire to chase and nip at the heels, that comes from a prey drive. So dogs like your border collies have a high prey drive. And then your livestock guardian dogs have a high defense drive. So that's a dangerous animal, right? You get a dog that has a high defense drive that's willing to fight at the drop of a hat, and you mix that with a dog that has a high prey drive, that can be a dangerous, dangerous animal. And so in the West, we have gone away from that decades ago. and we have either herding dogs or livestock protection dogs. But in other countries, they still have a lot of that crossbreeding or whatever you want to call it, where they try to have a dual purpose dog. The the one that approached us was obvious. He was a guardian dog. He was not a herding dog. He was 100% a guardian dog. But I couldn't tell you about the other two. Anyway,
So this is one thing I find interesting with dogs is like when I meet a dog that I'd never met before, and so I get the chance to practice some of the skills of reading the body language. And some of this, a lot of the stray dogs here in Ukraine are very disinterested in you because they're around people all day long. They're just like they just couldn't care less about you. And a lot of the stray dogs here are below a certain size, and they have like sometimes this a tag on their ear. So obviously the authorities know about them. So I don't often meet a dog that's like interested in me and new, but sometimes if a neighbor has like a new dog and it's like behind a visible fence, then you can sort of interact with it more and learn how it goes. And one interesting thing, we have a neighbor around here is like I had a new dog and it's a female dog, and our German Shepherd gets on quite well with it behind the fence. There's a fence between them. But after a certain time of day, like 7 o'clock, the dog like becomes like Jekyll and Hyde and starts barking at me. Like not a bark like please come and visit me, but it's like a bark. Who are you? So I'm
right.
not quite sure what's going on there.
So it could be. How old is that dog?
Oh, that dog, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 or something.
Okay. So it probably doesn't have an eyesight issue. Not yet, anyway. So all dogs instinctively get more protective around the evening time, especially if the sun's already down. Some of them a little bit
Right.
early when the sun starts setting. Quick example: we lived in Arizona for a brief time, and I had a trailer that I couldn't store on my property. I had to rent a space at one of those outdoor storage units. The reason I went with this particular guy is he had a concrete block wall, uh, 7 foot or something like that, concrete block wall. I couldn't see over it. I'm 6'2", so it was a tall wall. He had that surrounding his property, and he had 3 German Shepherds patrolling it at night. There was a male and a female, and then they had one puppy. So basically, there was two German Shepherds. During the day, anybody could come through that gate that wanted to. It wasn't a big deal. They would come out and meet you for sure. But at night, he said, from like 5 o'clock onwards, please call before, don't just show up. And the reason for that was the way he had them trained, right? So during the day, they were good. They didn't care to let you pet them or anything, right? They're not pets. They're working dogs. The puppy was very friendly, but that's a puppy. But the adults, if you tried to pet them, they would back off, right? So they didn't want your attention. They were there to do a job, and they were doing that job during the day. It was fine. At night, he had a couple of guys jump the wall one night, and they the shepherds had them backed up against that concrete wall. They'd funneled them into a corner because he had trained them to get them into a corner so they can't escape and hold them there. And that's what they did. I mean, it was very instinctual to become more protective at night. There's ways to train that out of a dog, but I don't know that I agree with it, if that makes sense. It's good to have a dog maintain their instincts, especially when it comes to alerting you that something is abnormal.
A lot of these garden dogs, what's frustrating is like they just waste so much energy barking at other dogs. It'd be good if they could just like not do that, and then I guess but you wouldn't really want it barking at humans either all the time because then every time somebody walks past your gate, so. But then again, you want the person to know that you have this big dog behind the gate as well, as a sort of a warning sign. So I don't know where the balance is there.
So the balance is exercise. The most important thing you can do with your dog is exercise it every day. Every day the dog wakes up, he's got the same amount of energy, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This is why breed is so important, right? If you're a runner and you run every day, go ahead and get yourself an active dog. If you're a couch potato, don't, right? That the alerting that dogs do, let me back up. We mentioned earlier dogs are experts on body language, right? They can size you up in a matter of seconds as to whether or not you're a threat. They might, certain breeds, especially like your guardian dogs, they're not going to trust you, even if they don't think you're a threat, like that dog in Macedonia that I was talking about earlier. He knew we weren't a threat, so he didn't attack us, right? But he still didn't trust us, and he watched us until his flock had gone by. So a dog's still gonna, a protective dog is still going to do that. It's okay for them to do that. The barking at everything, every stimulus that happens, is because that dog is bored. 99 times out of 100, it's because that dog is bored to tears. They don't ever get out of the backyard. So when they get that energy day after day after day after day, it just builds and builds and builds and builds, then they kind of go insane in a way. It's, I don't know how better to describe it. It's just it creates mental issues within the dog. You cannot train a dog that's hyper. A dog that's hyper is a whole lot less likely to listen to you. And because, well, there's reasons for that we can get into, but the the energy has to be taken out of the dog. So when the energy is taken out of the dog, a tired dog is a happy dog, right? It's a content dog. If the dog doesn't have a massive amount of energy, then somebody walking by, he's going to look up and he's going to go, "Yep, they're not a threat," and he's going to leave it at that, right? He's still going to pay attention. He's still going to focus, but he's going to go, "Yep, they're not a threat." Okay. Oh, this one's acting a little weird. Start the growling, maybe stand up, and then if you do something stupid like, "Hey, puppy," then he'll start barking at you, right? But that's again to let everybody else know what's going on. But the main reason dogs are just, especially the little guys, like Jack Russell Terriers are notorious for this. The little guys have a ton of energy, and a lot of people, especially in the West, tend to think, well, I've got this big house, they got this big backyard compared to their size, right? I don't care how big your house is. You could live in the biggest house in the world. You could be a sheik in the the oil fields or in the one of the oil rich countries, and have a 20,000 square foot house. Once the dog is done investigating that, it's still a kennel. It just becomes a kennel to them. They have to get out and see things and do things and interact with the world. And the dogs that don't get to do that are the ones that tend to have problems.
Some places around here in Ukraine, I never see the owners walk the dogs, and they just sit there all day. And I just feel sorry for these dogs. Like, what kind of life is that? I mean, a human being would go insane pretty quick. To get a dog's got
Sure. I
less
mean,
mental requirements as a human, but
so dogs have two requirements, just like humans. They have to have a physical stimulus, physical exercise. They also have to have the mental. If the dog's not getting either one of those, so think of yourself in your house with no electronics, no board games, no books, no TV, no cell phone, no nothing, right? That's going to stimulate your brain, or distract you. Let's say, like we can live in our houses now, right? Because we have all of that stuff, all those conveniences. But a dog doesn't use those. A dog doesn't understand those, right? I do have a dog that loves to watch TV. He loves to see cats and critters on TV, but by and large, most dogs don't do that. Picture yourself in a house that has none of those amenities, and see how long you're going to last before you just start going insane because of your boredom, right? You can't get up and use tools to build anything. You know what I mean? You'd be digging a hole in the backyard too, just for something to do. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Those dogs that don't ever go anywhere, don't ever do anything, those are the ones that become, they are the problem dogs for society typically, and they also tend to have, man, what am I trying to say here? It can go one of two ways. if they're going to be anxiety ridden because of that. And the anxiety can create aggression or it can create fear. And the fear dogs are the most dangerous ones, the ones that are fearful.
I guess it's people just seeing the dog as cheap labor for protection, so the suffering of the dog isn't worth as much as the cheap protection it gives for your house, and that's the way people look at it,
Yeah,
I
there's that.
guess.
There's that. There's the thing is a phenomenon I like to, or I've not that I like to. There's a phenomenon I've noticed over the years where somebody says, "Well, I had a lab, let's say a Labrador Retriever. I had a lab when I was a kid, so I want a lab now. That lab was the perfect dog for me. You know, we used to do this together, we used to do that together." And then when we came home, he would just lay right at the couch or at the foot of the couch or whatever. Right? He's just a great dog. Well, he's a great dog because you were a kid out doing things with him, right? Also, there's no two dogs that are alike. I don't care if they came from the same litter. They're not. There's no two dogs that are alike. Just like humans, right? They're very individualistic. So a lot of times people will go and they'll get a lab. Let's say I'm saying lab because there's a lot of people that get labs. It was 20 years ago. It was very common that somebody who just wanted the perfect dog would get a lab. Nowadays, you see a lot more of that with golden retrievers. They've kind of come into popularity probably in the last 10, 15 years, maybe more so. Not coming. They've always been a popular breed amongst the bird hunters and whatnot, but they've bred them to be really really good family pets. So with the with the dog that's just the perfect dog, they think is going to act like it did when it was a kid, not realizing that number one, all dogs are different and they have different requirements when it comes to that mental and physical exercise, the release that they have to have. But also that you were a lot more active as a kid than you are as an adult. You had a lot more free time as a kid often than you did as an adult. You know, you've got jobs and you've got, you know, if you've got kids, you're taking them to sporting events, let's say, or, you know, you're running errands to the grocery store, you're paying bills, you're going to the post office, whatever. The parents or the adults are doing all of those things where the kids just like, go to school, maybe play a sport or two, have homework. You know, on the weekends, I'm free. Well, if you're running a household, you're not free on the weekends. You're constantly doing something. And we work for that 7 days or whatever, 2 weeks off a year to go on a vacation and try to relax, right? We work all year for that. But the dogs are not as involved in our lives as adults as they were when we were kids, unless we make concerted efforts to do it, right? So I tell people anywhere you go, take your dog. If your dog can't go inside a store, leave him in the car, but take him with you anyway. We go grocery shopping, right? That's dangerous to do with dogs because you come home with half your groceries. So we bought igloos and coolers. We put the coolers and stuff in there, but the dogs still go with us most days. And I had 11 at one point in time. I've got 7 dogs right now. So if I can do it with 7 dogs, most people can do it with one or two. And none of my dogs are little. The smallest dog I got is 50 pounds.
The smallest dog we ever had on my animals channel, it wasn't a Chihuahua, it's even smaller than that, but it's just always shivering. But I got more attached to that one dog than any other dog. I could almost say I love that dog. You know, it's just because it's always like on you when you go a walk with it. It's like inside my t-shirt and its head is poking up there. I just never got attached to an animal as much as that one dog. I don't know what it is about it. It's just so vulnerable and tiny and just it really got to me. I
That's
guess
your
that's why some
that's your male protective instincts kicking in. If you had a little daughter, little baby girl, you'd feel the same way, right?
yeah, yeah.
I say male.
But I,
It's just humans,
but
I guess. But
but those feelings only last about 3 or 4 weeks. Now that we give the dog back, I don't feel the same way about that dog anymore. It's kind of weird, you know. Like, but then we get
the
a
same
loan of it
dog,
again. We get the same dog,
the
yeah.
same.
For
You're referring to the same Chihuahua or whatever it was.
there's not a Chihuahua; it's something else. It's an even more expensive breed than Chihuahua. It's like I think they're like $4,000 or $5,000 even in Ukraine.
Yeah. So a lot of
Um,
those little dogs cannot have their own litters. They can't birth them out their canals. They don't. The puppies don't fit. So English bulldogs are notorious for this. They just about all of them have to be C-sectioned out. So that's an expensive process. So if you're if you're looking for a dog and the dog is pricey, there might be some of that involved as well. A dog should be expensive. I'm going to go on a soapbox here for a minute. There's this whole there's this whole industry. It has become an industry of dogs and dog rescues. I run one myself, so I'm not speaking of this from ignorance, right? In a perfect world, there would be no backyard breeders. There would be no shelter rescues, none of that. If Adam was king for a day, the shelter dogs would have a home, their shelter, whatever. They would have all the interaction they needed for their life, but we would stop adopting those dogs out. Why? Because the dogs that wind up in shelters, by and large, are your problem dogs. So it takes somebody who's an active person and understands dog psychology, rehabilitation, that kind of thing, to work with those dogs and to get them normal for civilian world, right, or for society. You A lot of people are against breeders. If you have a breeder, if you go to a dog breed, a legit dog breeder that knows what they're doing and they're doing it the right way, they should have as many questions, if not more, for you than you do for them. There should be a contract saying something like, if you ever give up on this dog, you give him back to us. You don't take him to the shelter or give him to anybody else. They should want to come see your place or have you take pictures of your place and bring it to them, and they can kind of look over it, right? They should ask you your dog experience. They should ask you a whole bunch of things, right? If you show up to a breeder and they're like, yeah, it's $1,000 for this dog. Do you want the dog? And that's really all they have. That's not a good breeder. That's a backyard breeder. And those people breed problem dogs because they don't know what they're doing. If you're buying a very expensive dog, that person is, I mean, the reason I say dogs should be expensive is if you're doing it the right way, it's going to be expensive. Vets cost money. If you're certifying their, let's say you're certifying their hips, you're certifying their elbows, you're certifying their health. There's a lot of dogs that have breeds that have heart problems or eye problems, knee and elbow joint problems, and that stuff can get certified at a young age from a vet. Especially your joint issues. They can tell whether or not the joint is malformed through an x-ray, let's say, right? So hip dysplasia, we talk about with German Shepherds, we talk about hip dysplasia a lot. That hip dysplasia comes from backyard breeders. That's how it gets into the system, is people not breeding for the proper things, right? So just because I have a dog and he's a good dog does not mean I should breed him. There's so much more that goes into that. In all honesty, maybe at best 3 to 5% of dogs should ever be bred, because you have to have the right temperament, you have to have the right size, you have to have the right health, you have to have the right joint stuff, you have to have so many things that go into it, right? Breed characteristics. But a lot of people, and again, when I was stupid and young and ignorant, I did it myself. But a lot of people breed a dog because they have a dog and he's a good specimen. They think he's a well-behaved dog or whatever, right? She is a well-behaved dog. They're a good physical representation of the breed. And they go, he listens to me when I talk to him. He's not aggressive and he looks right. So this is the right dog. I should breed this dog and make some money. Most breeders don't make any money at the end of the day because of all the other expenses and time that's involved in it. And research. They spend buku hours on research. So you should have a whole bunch of questions for your breeder when you go there. And your breeder should have a whole bunch of questions and a contract for you. It should be a relationship, not just a transaction. If the person you go to is just, if the meeting feels like it's transactional in nature, it's a monetary thing, then that is not a good breeder, and you're risking some serious problems by taking those dogs. Now, the reason I said if Adam was king for a day, that's the way we would do it. Eventually, the bad dogs would die off, I guess, because they'll live their life. I'm not saying euthanize them. Do like I'm doing, where you give them a home. It's their last home that they'll ever have. But don't breed those dogs and don't compound the problem. The biggest problem we have with dogs, especially when they become mentally unstable, is bad ownership and bad breeding. So there's my soapbox moment. It's, dog breeders are not evil people. They're great people that know, the ones that know what they're doing and that do it right. They're awesome people, and they're a huge asset to society that is often overlooked.
Wow, I had no idea. Yeah, that makes more sense now, the prices that they charge. Yeah, for sure.
A lot of those. So one of the things, he said, eclectic background. One of the things I used to do as a corrections officer, and a lot of people don't realize this, but 95% of all crimes, violent crimes, are committed by the same 5% of people. It's a revolving door. People get out, they commit crime, they come back in, right? We don't rehabilitate anybody anymore. Dogs are a lot the same way. Dogs in shelters. They get out, the person decides they can't handle them, they go back in. They get adopted again, they get out, the person can't handle them, they go back in. The shelters become a revolving door as well. Not obviously to the same extent, but they do.
I don't really want to get a rescue dog now. Save some money.
Yeah, you can save some money, right? The I used to charge when I was going around to people's homes, and if I'm going to do it now, I'll do it as well. But I charge $50 an hour. My first meeting with you is 4 hours long. It's not a cheap investment, right? Now I would probably charge more. That was 10 years ago or whatever. That I was 5 years ago maybe. So part of that is because I did aggression and aggression rehab. So if I'm going to risk getting bit, you're going to be paying me for it, right? So there's that. There's also the fact that backyard breeding dogs tend to have a lot higher vet bills. So now you're paying for a trainer, you're paying more for a vet than you would otherwise. There's medications. A lot of these backyard breeding dogs backyard bred dogs, whatever, these rescue dogs have allergy issues. Sometimes that's can be a breed characteristic. Golden retrievers are notorious for having allergies, so are labs. But nobody really knows where it comes from, right? In my humble and uneducated opinion, a lot of that came from backyard breeding as well. There's no correlation. There's no other correlation that I can think of where significant allergies would come into play without us breeding the wrong dogs. Which, by the way, allergies is another thing that good breeders have to think about. Go ahead and let them out, babe.
Right. Go that way. No.
Go that. Root. Over here, thank you. Go. Come here, guys.
As long as they don't plug anything, we're good.
Wow.
He let him out before I didn't know the gate was open or the screen door was open. Good, Buffas. Go play. Go sniff and pee on stuff. Where's Ruby? Come here, Ruby, dude.
You don't know how many times I take them, and people are just taking pictures of the car because there's dogs in it. A number of dogs in it. Honey, Izzy.
Hello, it's Nikos the Greek.
Yeah, it was really confusing because I was like, man, that's not a Greek name, then that's got to be close to it. Come here, Buffas. Where's honey? Come here, honey.
Gotta wind them up.
Yeah, they heard you that time. This is Sadie. She is an absolute sweetheart. She was one that we got out of a puppy mill. Yes, she's just a sweetheart.
I've learnt to wind up dogs pretty good, actually.
What's that?
I've learnt to wind up dogs pretty good, just for kicks.
Come here, Haas. Go away. Haas, up. This is the Shepherd Malamute mix I was telling you about.
Oh, beautiful! Yeah, big.
Yeah, he's a good-looking dog. So when we first Haas in town, we live about 10 minutes outside of the town, but in town there's some baseball fields, softball fields that the kids use, and it was about 40 below, and people found a puppy out by those softball fields, and so they had taken it straw. He wasn't letting anybody come near him or anything. And they had taken some straw out there and some food and water for him, but nobody could catch him. And one dog person in town calls another dog person in town, and they wind up getting a hold of my lovely bride. And she takes Honey, my alpha queen, out there. She takes her down there, and as soon as Haas saw Honey, saw another dog, he's like, "Woo!" And he just went right towards her. So Ramey's my wife's name. She was able to pick him up and bring him home. And for I don't even know how long, 6 months maybe, he wanted nothing to do with me. Nothing. He was just scared to death of me. Right now, I'm 6'2" and I'm about 300 pounds, so I'm not a small guy. So that I guarantee that had something to do with it. But yeah, just wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. I used to work 300 miles away. I'd work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off when I was in the oil field. And so fast forward, let's say 6 months or so after we get him, and I come home and he greets me at the door like, "Yay!" He like jumps up on me and wanted loving. And it's like, 2 weeks ago when I left, you wanted nothing to do with me. What was this light switch? But
Dogs
yeah.
have a personality. I think even cats have a more of a personality, unpredictableness.
Yeah, cats are definitely a lot harder to read their body language. They subdue quite a bit of that. And I mean, there's certain things obviously you can do or you can see, but yeah, they could just be sitting up on a mantle and they'll just be sitting there and you'll think they're all happy, and then they knock off grandma's ashes for no reason whatsoever. Or your drink. What are you doing, Tankers? You got an eye booger, bud.
I'm trying to get our German Shepherd not to try and attack the local cat that we've kind of adopted, but you just can't train it out of this dog. It's just it's not really
difficult.
that aggressive towards other dogs, but cats, it just gets really excited about them.
Mm-hmm. Small critter, right? That he wants to hunt. All his instincts say I should be eating that.
Yeah. But he doesn't
if I can,
chase birds.
I'm gonna use this moment to see if I can do this. That's our charity, Grandpa's Retirement Acres. So if you see that logo or whatever, that's a registered trademark and all that. So I'm gonna use that moment to give myself a shout out, or my wife, really.
Is that in your background there, or they're kept? Your property?
I didn't catch that. Yeah, that's all my front yard. It's not fenced in.
Uh-huh.
If that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. It looks like
we've got 9 acres out here, and I've cleared about 2 acres, left about 7 of it wooded.
You should start a YouTube channel just with the interactions of the dogs. I think that'd be fascinating.
So that Grandpa's Retirement Acres is a YouTube channel. We post some videos and stuff on there, but the wife has been after me for a while to start doing training videos and answer questions, kind of like I was doing on that video. Do it in video format, so people have concerns or comments or questions, I can address them. And I don't know, it's not been high on my priority list. I think it should be, though. I think I need to start heading, as I haven't commented a lot on dog videos that I've watched. There's so many of them that I got nothing good to say about. And I kind of try to live by the old adage, if you got nothing good to say, don't say anything at all.
Don't visit my animal YouTube channel then.
What's that?
I've got quite a lot of funny videos where I'm basically taking the scruff of my neck on my German Shepherd and saying facelift video, and then getting people throwing hate at me and all this kind of stuff. Or doing slow motion videos, throwing things on top of cats sleeping and stuff like that.
Right. Oh, that's funny. Well, that's the internet too, right? Doesn't matter what you do, somebody's going to throw hate at you for something. Before we end this, though, I would really like to get into what he said in that video, the ABCs.
Yeah, avoiding,
sure. And maybe a little bit more about or with training and what the dog actually needs from You as the owner.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So, you want just to jump right in, or did you have specific questions surrounding any of that?
I guess also I'd like to cover like how you would actually. I know we're talking here about like dogs, like their family and that, but how you would actually best chances of fighting a dog,
Okay,
because that's also a low chance thing that's I guess useful to know.
for
Even
sure.
even
Yeah.
if it
So
just
that
depresses people to hopelessness, that's fine as well.
I'm sorry.
Even if it's just like makes people aware of how fragile and weak they are against a dog, that's good as well for people to know.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So that video. Okay. So that was under the C, the confronting, right? That he had talked about. He did the ABCs, and I think breaking it down, I'd never thought about doing it that way myself. That was I was impressed at how simplistic he made it. Avoid, bolt, challenge. That was very, very good in the way he broke it down. So I was impressed with that video. His dogs obviously are very well behaved, and I just the reason I commented on that video to begin with was because of how impressed I was with what they were doing. There was some differences that I'm going to have versus what they did or what they presented, but especially when it comes to fighting a dog, there's so much that goes into that, right? Your size, strength, and athletic capabilities, the dog size, strength, and athletic capabilities, any tools that you have at your disposal, your pain tolerance, that kind of thing, or those kinds of things. I mean, what I tried to do in that comment string was, unless somebody specifically, there was one gentleman that's basically my size. He's like, he's did it all in that metric math. But when I did the converter, he's basically 6'2", 300 pounds. Or maybe he wrote 6'2". Maybe I'm thinking a different one. But anyhow, he's basically my size, 280 pounds or whatever. And so I can't tell him to do the same things with a dog during a confrontation that I would tell I can't back up. I can't tell a 90-year-old woman to do the same things I'm going to tell him, right? Just because she's not going to have the physical abilities, right? So his ABCs, the first one was avoidance, but he also included awareness in that, and that is by far and away the most important part. So that means no earbuds in, no music, no cell phone usage. Don't be distracted. I hate the term, but be in the moment with your dog. Your dog's enjoying the walk. Be there with your dog. Pay attention to your dog, because your dog, we were talking about this with hunting earlier, right? Your dog is going to notice things before you do, most cases. So if your dog cues in on something, look over there, see what it is. You are much, much more likely to be attacked if you're walking a dog than if you're walking by yourself.
Oh, really?
Much
Okay.
more. And that goes into a lot of it. And this was one of the comments in there as well. Your dog is walking through another dog's neighborhood, right? So that video that those folks referenced, or that those folks showed, it was a very simple video, which again was why I was glad that they chose it. There wasn't a whole lot of variables in there. The lady's walking down an alleyway. It looked like an alley. It's a very narrow road or whatever, street, whatever you want to call it. And there wasn't a whole lot of options to move to get out of the way. And the dog attacked. So the the closeness of proximity of all of that cancels out a lot of variables, right? You don't have time to do a lot of other things. Even if that dog hadn't attacked her from the back, she wouldn't have had time to jump up on a car or jump over a fence, right? She was going to be in the confrontation. So why did she wind up there? Because she wasn't aware of the situation, because she didn't avoid the situation. If you have the option to walk across the field, walk across the field. Don't walk down an alleyway, because you have limited means of ingress and egress. You got limited means of being movement, right? There's not a lot that you can do in an alleyway. You're pretty much going to have to fight the dog, because you're not going to be able to outrun it. You're not going to be able to outmaneuver it. Her best bet would have been jumping over a fence if there was one there, or jumping up on a car. The jumping up on a car situation is very, very, very sketchy. If it's been raining, they're slippery. They're sloped to be aerodynamic, which means they don't provide very good footing. If you're wearing flip-flops or slides or whatever, something that doesn't have very good traction, you're liable to slip when you jump up on them. There is techniques to getting up on cars, and there's actually YouTube videos how to jump up on a car. So you can find those. I don't know how to search it. I guess I would just search it that way. But there's a lot of dog. Now, police canines are trained to jump up on cars as well, but most dogs are not. You're not going to be randomly attacked by a police canine. So we'll just cancel that part out of the equation here. Most dogs will not jump up on a vehicle, even though they can jump up on the hood and get on the top of the car, the same as you can, probably easier than you and I could. Most dogs are not going to do that. So getting up on a vehicle is a good option. And I don't remember if there was one in that video or not. So since you are much more likely to be attacked when you are walking your dog, there's things to think about in that. So first off, that's why no earbuds, no cell phones, no distractions whatsoever. When you're walking your dog, because that is your highest point of danger, let's say, right? The highest risk. So you need to be
or
aware.
My dog attacked if I'm with the dog.
Yes. So the reason I say yes is in that comment string as well, there was a lot of people that were talking about picking up their dogs and holding their dogs. And there was one woman that did it successfully, and it can work. It is a viable option. But what can also happen, I saw a video of this not too long ago, is the dog says, okay, I can't reach that. The attacking dog says, I can't reach your dog that I want to bite, so now I'm going to bite you. And he actually took her to the ground because he got a hold of her leg and pulled her leg out to the side, and she fell. Being on the ground is the absolute worst place you can be in a dogfight. It is the worst place. I don't care if you're a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It is the worst place for you to be because the dog is faster. They're more agile. They can get to the back of your neck or to your throat faster than you can do anything. If you want to get up, most people cannot get up without the use of their hands, at least one. So that is one defensive tool that you're taking out of the fight in order to try to get back up, and the dog knows it. So they're likely to attack. Plus, being on the ground is a vulnerable position in the dog's eyes as well, so they don't want to let you back up. So the main thing in a dogfight is don't get taken to the ground. Don't let yourself. If you fall down, everything goes out the window. Just get yourself back to your feet as fast as you can, at least to your knees, but try to get back to your feet. That was why that was one of the things I didn't like about his video. He's talking about kicking the dog. I get the sentiment. It's an instinctive thing because you want to push the dog away you want him to be as far away from you as possible. Your legs are longer than your arms, right? And so you want him out there. So it is instinctive to push the dog, or to kick at the dog. But if the dog grabs a hold of that foot, you're likely to go to the ground. It happens all the time when dogs attack people. So you want whatever is closest to the dog, that's what they're going to bite. So if you're going to go into a dog fight, then you need to just understand that you're not going to come out of it unscathed. You are going to be bitten, and it is going to be one of the worst pains you've ever had in your life. It is going to hurt like a mofo. There's nothing that most of us have ever done that's going to have that level of pain as an active aggressive dog bite. So active aggression and fear aggression. Okay. If a dog bites you and lets go, bites you and backs off, that's fear-driven aggression. If the dog is actively aggressive, he's going to bite, and he's going to clamp on, and he's going to start thrashing. that's when it really, really hurts because he's shredding all that meat and nerves and everything in there. Okay. Also, due to their canine teeth, if they get around you, you're not going to be able to pull out of it. They can latch on like that. So don't try to pull out of a dog's mouth because you're not. It's not going to happen. The best thing you can do is actually push towards them, especially if you can get their head up against something or if you can grab the back of their head and push towards them. It's going to cause their mouth to want to go open. Does that make sense? Because you're shoving your
You're
arm.
the closer the mouth is to the pivot point, the stronger force they can bite you with, because that's how they chew bone. They don't use the incisors; they use their molars to crunch
Right,
their.
right.
It's
But when
sucky no
you're
matter
pushing
what.
back in there, the bone isn't shoving back into the back of their mouth, right? The bone's just sitting there and they're gnawing on it with their big, strong teeth in the back, their big molars, right?
Yeah,
But they're, if
yeah,
so, their canine teeth are going to do one of two things. Their canine teeth are going to go beyond your arm, and they're going to lock in like this, right, to where you can't pull out, or they're going to sink into your flesh because they bit you right here. Doesn't matter where the canine teeth go, you're not going to pull out of it. So don't try to pull out of it. Go forwards. That's one of the hardest things for people when they're in a scary situation. It's a human instinct to be out of it, right? I just want to get out of this. I just leave me alone, go away, go away. And just they try to back up and back up. When you're pulling and the dog's got a hold of you, you're actually helping him tear up your arm because you're adding force into that movement that he's, you know what I mean? That's he's trying to tear up your arm. You're adding force into that, an oppositional force. So
it's a bit like
there's things
boxing.
we'll talk
This
about.
boxing that I've done is that if you're just retreating and trying to avoid, you're going to be opened up to more shots. You're going to not see things coming towards you. So, but if you're like moving forward and resisting and throwing some, you're going to get hurt less. You know.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Because if for no other reason than because you're making the other person, your opponent, have to think about your offense as well, not just your defense. So in sparring, in boxing, in martial arts, if two people are fighting, you're trying to do your offense, right? You're trying to push your offense while negating their defense as well. If they're just turtled up, if they're just shelled up, they have no offense. It's just strictly a defense. Now all you got to do is worry about, getting around their defense. You don't have to worry about what they're going to do to you in return. Everything a dog chases, everything a dog attacks wants to get away. If you're backing off, if you're trying to get away, then you're acting just like a prey animal, right? You're acting just like something that they would attack to hunt or eat or kill. The prey drive gets kicked in even harder at that point. What they're not used to is that prey animal fighting back. So, especially if they're one on one, we haven't got into the pack mentality yet, but if you're 3-on-1, Lord, I pray you got a knife or a gun or a pepper spray or something, because it's going to be a very, very bad day for you. But if it's 3 dogs, you rush towards one. Sometimes the other dogs will go, "Oh, what the heck was that?" And they'll just stand there for a second. But it gives you the offensive advantage because you're changing their mindset. And that's what you have to do if you're going to get a dog fight to stop, short of killing the dog or maiming it, in a massive way. Which, I mean, if you're against 3 dogs or 2, your best bet is to go after the one that appears to be the most aggressive, that appears to be in charge, if you will, of the other dogs.
Right. Okay.
Instinctively, we would probably want to go against the one that seems to be weaker and more scared, or more, not scared, but timid, the one that's being led versus the leader. The psychology end of that is any challenges that come to a dog pack, the alpha has to address. The leader of the pack has to address.
Right.
So this is why it's important for you to lead the walks when you walk dogs. So I'll come back to the being attacked in a minute. Let me give an example here. If you've met somebody before, but your dog hasn't, then as far as your dog is concerned, that's a non-friendly person. That's a suspicion, right? Dogs should be, most dogs are going to be suspicious of people they don't know. It doesn't matter how many times you've met them. If the dog hasn't met them, then that's still an outsider, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're walking your dog, if you see somebody or somebody wants to come up and you met and pet your dog, whether you've met the person or not is irrelevant. It's whether the dog has met them or not. That is the key. But you should not allow, a lot of times we'll let the dogs go sniff each other before we do anything. You should address it first. You need to meet the person or meet the other dog before you allow your dog to do it.
Okay.
The reason for that is your dog sees it as a challenge, right? A suspicion, a whatever, a threat, let's say.
Oh, I've
So
not
when
been
you
doing
tell your
that.
dog, come again?
I've not been doing that. I've always been letting my German Shepherd inspect the dog first before I go up and pat the other dog.
So what you're in, yeah, a lot of people do that, right? That's very, very common. But what you're telling your dog at that point in time is, I'm not in charge right now. You are. I want you to address this potential threat, not me. So you're sending mixed signals to your dog, and that causes confusion in the dog. In this situation, I'm in charge. In this situation, my owner is in charge, right? So that most dogs are going to be okay with that, but there are some that will not. A good chunk of dogs are going to start getting anxiety when they go on walks because they're not supposed to be in charge in any other portion of their life, let's say. But then when they go on walks, they're out in front, they're pulling on the leash, they're meeting and greeting everybody first, right? So they're the ones they're the ones leading the walk, and they're the ones investigating the potential threats to come towards them, not you. So, not the master, the owner. The the walking of the dog should be either by your side or behind you, not like dragging, at the end of the leash or whatever, but they shouldn't be in front of you is what I'm getting at. And this is the psychology part of it. This isn't the AKC, whatever, dog training portion. We're just talking about the way the dog thinks. Leaders lead, followers follow. So if the dog is out in front of you, you're telling the dog by default, you're leading this migration that we're doing. Okay. It is okay to allow the dog out in front of you, but only after you have established that you're leading the walk, the dog is paying attention to you and is not trying to get out in front of you. And he's been doing that for a decent amount of time, say 5 minutes, without having to give a correction to get the dog back behind you again. If the dog is constantly pulling out in front of you and you're constantly having to correct, then when you correct him and you get him back to either beside you or slightly behind you, and he does that for 30 seconds, it's not okay to release him at that point. Does that make sense? He has to do it for a while. So it'll be dog dependent, situationally dependent. If you're going to go on a walk and it's a 10-minute walk, let's say you only have 10 minutes to walk your dog, it very well might be that he's not going to get to just wander around at the end of the leash for that entire walk. It might be that has to be focused for the entire time just because his brain isn't there that day or whatever. A dog will get, it is a challenge for a dog mentally to constantly pay attention to you, to stay next to you or behind you and not be out in front of you or off to the side sniffing on bushes and whatever, right? So a dog will get a lot of energy drain from a 10-minute structured walk. I would venture to say more than they would get on, say, a 30 or even a 60-minute walk where they're just allowed to go do whatever. Reason being is that the excitement breeds energy. Okay. So whenever a dog gets excited about something, they become more energetic, right? A lot of times we see that as happiness, but it's sometimes it can be. But I tell people, especially in a situation like this where I'm armchair quarterbacking something, to not view it as happiness, to view it as excitement, to view it as almost a negative thing. So you got to calm the dog down, make them walk next to you to submit to your leadership in that walk, in that instance. When they've done that for a decent amount of time, I would say no less than 5 minutes, and you haven't given them a correction during that amount of time. Anytime you give them a correction, that 5 minutes resets, it starts over again. Then when they do it for 5 minutes, with a constant focus on you and not messing up, then you can say okay, and you can let them kind of wander around. Even at that point, during that exercise, call them back and make them heel again, especially if they're pulling on the end of the leash. That's not, they're breeding that energy again, that excitement. They're getting wound up about something. Anytime a dog has excitement, they have more energy that your walk needs to burn off. So you're going to have to walk them further. And if we don't have the time to do that, then the walk itself becomes a source of excitement, or anxiety, a source of oh my god, what's going to happen next, right? Over time, that develops it within the dog. So you need to be the one walking the dog, not the dog walking you, is kind of how I say it. When the dog is behaving, then they can be allowed. I don't like when people let their dogs loose. There is a time and a place for that, but if let's say you're walking down a city street, you don't want to just drop the leash. Let's say you got a standard 6 foot leash. Hold on to the end of the leash. Let the dog wander around and smell things and do whatever dogs want to do, but hold the end of the leash, even if there's slack in it and all that, right? Don't just let the leash go, because then you have no positive control. If the dog decides, if a cat runs out across the sidewalk and out into the street, your dog is gone, right? If somebody comes around the corner, if a dog comes by, you don't have any positive control of your dog. So if you set the leash down, if you drop the leash, so always keep the leash in your hand, at least the loop at the end. Excuse me. And then allow them to venture off as far as your leash allows. Tension on the leash is stress to the dog. So if your leash is tight, the dog is building anxiety within their own mind. So there should always be some slack in it. If the dog is at the end of the leash, give them a pop, make them come back a little bit. They don't have to come back to the strict heel necessarily. If they've been behaving and you're letting them loose, like we were just talking about, they don't have to come back to a strict heel at that point. We just don't want them pulling on the leash. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I in the more open areas, I'm more kind of free with the leash. Although sometimes this German Shepherd gets annoying, spending like a minute smelling here, a minute smelling there. But when I'm in a town, I try and keep it very close. In recreating, you see Radom, and it takes them a while to adjust to be like walking in the city centre, because a lot of the times they're in the open fields and things like that. So
yeah. And anytime they're in a new environment like that, you want to pay extra close attention to them, right? So they're, like you were saying, takes them a minute to adjust, right? To walking in, because they're usually in open fields and now they're not. They're going to act like they did in the open fields. So if you let them off leash and they're just running from one smell to the next, and then all of a sudden you're on a city sidewalk, that's what they're going to want to do there as well. So if you just let the leash down and you're on a city sidewalk, they're gone, right? Potentially. They're, oh man, what's that smell over there on the other side of the street? Somebody peed on a tire. Let me go, smell that, right? And you might not have a second chance to keep your dog safe. Again, this goes back to, if we were living in the woods and in a survival situation, it'd probably be good to follow them, but they don't most times dogs don't understand things like traffic, sidewalks, crossings, you know what I mean? Street crossings. So we have to control that so that we can keep our dogs safe. Otherwise, they're going to get hit, or they're going to get, that's kind of the worst thing, right? It's getting run over by a car. But there's also the potential of a fight or chasing something. They could chase something. Even if they don't get hit, they're a mile away before they realize that they've lost you. Now you've lost your dog. And there's so many dogs that wind up in the pound because of that, because they were out on a walk. The owner took the leash off and they chased a cat, let's say, and they're way gone before they even realize it. And now
Yeah,
they don't
dogs'
know where they were
navigational
running because they're
skills
just in the.
don't seem that
Hmm?
good. Dogs' navigational skills, domestic dogs' navigational skills, just to me don't seem very good.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the cities, their dogs are better in the woods than they are in the cities. But yeah, there is a lot of that. They're not great. A lot of that is because of the distraction, right? Have you ever been driving, let's say driving home and then or driving somewhere, and all of a sudden you realize that you haven't been paying attention for the last half hour or whatever. All of a sudden you're home and you're like, "Well, crap! The last time I was really conscious, I was at so and so's house 5 miles ago." Right? It's the same kind of thing with dogs, right? If they're chasing something, they're not thinking about where they're at or where they're going. All they're thinking about is, I'm going to catch that cat and I'm gonna tear him up, right? Or that squirrel or whatever. They're not thinking about where they are and where they were, the path. So getting back home or getting back to where you were can easily be a challenge just because they're not thinking about it. And then the more scared they get, the more likely they are just to run blind. If for some reason, you see this more in smaller dogs or dogs with high pack drives, where they'll get nervous because they're out in an unfamiliar area and they're by themselves, and they'll just start running blind. And a lot of it is like they were running blind after the cat, but now they're running blind out of fear. They're not chasing anything. They have no idea where they're at or where they're going. So that's why it's really, really important to keep your dog tethered to you. There was a lady that I was working with at one point. She had I can't remember what it was. She had some sort of issue, medical issue, where she would lose strength in her extremities. And so what we worked on, or what we developed for her, was a mountain climber's carabiner, or a rappeller's carabiner. They have two different types. They have the ones that you screw up and then the auto locking ones. So we went with the auto locking ones, where you just twist the lock, you twist it and you flip the carabiner open and then loop the handle of the leash through that. And the carabiner was attached to her belt. So if her arms needed a break, she could just hook the leash onto the carabiner, and then if the dog took off, it's still attached to her, even though she's losing, or if she's losing muscle strength and the dog is starting to act up or whatever, she can secure the dog on that, so that she doesn't lose control of him because she doesn't have the strength in her hands at that moment in time to control the leash. He's tethered to her.
That could be dangerous on the
So
road,
there's
though.
What's that? Being
If
tethered?
if a dog runs after a cat onto the road and you're tethered to the dog and you get ran over.
Right. So that goes back to situationally dependent, right? If you've got a 95-year-old or a 95-pound female attached to a 180-pound dog, you're absolutely right. In this case, it was a little dinky dog, so it wasn't going to pull her into the street. So that's one of those picking the right dog for you and your family kind of things. If you're not a strong person, physically strong person, probably not best to get a Mastiff, right?
So
If you go ahead.
yeah. So just going back to the fighting the dog. So my reference point
Yeah.
is basically this oversized German Shepherd. So whenever I think, if this dog ever attacked me, what would I do? So even if I compare this, like, people have to realize you're going to be really afraid if the dog becomes aggressive towards you. Like, we sometimes have dogs, stray dogs here, that sort of run after us when we're walking around, and normally I can sort of do a gorilla type thing towards the other dog and it backs down. But there's this time last week where this dog didn't really back down. This is smaller than German Shepherd. It's a bitch, and she's always trying to bite him in the sensitive places. But it didn't stop when I was aggressive towards it. It sort of kept coming towards me, and I was like, immediately started getting a bit afraid. And that was a smaller dog than my German Shepherd. And this German Shepherd only once bit me by mistake. I was a bit younger and it got excited, it turned around and it sort of it didn't actually latch onto it. I just sort of did this. My hand was sore for about 3 days, and I wasn't at a full strength bite. And I can't imagine, like, it just went into the hand like that. 3 days and it was kind of like pain. So I can't imagine what it like if it actually did a proper bite onto my hand. So I would have no chance
So
against that
that's why,
dog if in a fight situation.
for sure, yeah, that's why I stress that it's going to be a pain like you've never felt before. I don't care if you're a woman that's had babies, it's going to be a pain like you've never felt before. And in part because you don't have control over what the dog's going to do, right? The dog is dictating that this fight is going to occur, not you. You didn't go out seeking a dog fight. So there's a part of a hesitation in you that's like, I just want this to go away. Why is this happening, right? There's they call it the ODA loop, but there's a thing that happens in our brain, and this is why people struggle to act fast enough. Okay. So the ODA loop is observe, orientate, decide, and act. So you at first have to observe that there is a threat, right? That whether that's hearing or seeing or sensing, right? God gave women a sixth sense, woman's intuition, we call it. And ladies, if those alarm bells start going off, listen to it. Y'all got a much better sense for that than men do by far.
Amen, brother.
so that's your observing part, right? You see that there is a threat, then you orientate, right? Or maybe it's orientate, observe, I don't remember, but you position yourself towards the threat. So you focus on it, right? You're like, boom, there's a threat. It's a legit threat. Okay, now that's part of the decision making process, right? To decide. So and I might have these off a little bit, but the decision making part is, am I going to run? Am I going to get big and aggressive? Am I going to start getting my arm ready for a dog bite? Am I going to start getting my weapon out? Hopefully I have one. I don't care if it's a walking stick. You should never ever walk your dog without something, some sort of tool, because believe me, it hurts a lot less if that dog bites on a walking stick than if he bites on your arm, right? So have something there. I know there's a lot of countries out there where you can't carry a gun, you can't carry a knife, you can't carry whatever. Carry a cane, carry a regular walking stick. Like if you're gonna, be up in the woods, carry, if you're a little weaker, they make carbon fiber trekking poles, and they got a little metal end on the end of them, and that's for like stabbing into the ground or into ice. If you're up on the ice, go to an outdoor supply store and get you one of those. Get something that you can keep between you and the dog if the dog is coming at you.
That and those walking sticks with the metal points, that's a lethal weapon. You could kill somebody with that. And also,
Yeah, usually they're about an inch long. The ones I've seen anyway, the metal tip's about an inch long. That is plenty to make that dog rethink his approach.
Yeah, even just a
and
stick
get that
is such
shift of that mindset.
a large force multiplier. I mean, you can carry a stick that's 8 inches long with a point, and that in itself is a much greater force multiplier than using your fist. It turns your fist basically into an elbow. An elbow is a great weapon, but it's really close range. But the thing is, if you're going to carry a cane, you need to be practicing with that cane to be any good with it. You have to basically look at how fencers work. And there's a lot of momentum. You look at police, how they wield batons. You also have to work on your shoulder flexibility and mobility, because if you just cold turkey take your cane and full force trying to hit yourself with a dog, you're quite likely to dislocate your shoulder, and you won't have. You better just training with a stick to know how to use it. So you can have it over your shoulder,
For sure.
come down, missing your knee, come back, stepping away. It's also very important with a dog because they're so agile. You need to be always like moving like a boxer to the side or to the I mean, you're never going to be able to be more agile than a dog, but if you have a weapon, you can swing with that weapon and move at the same time. And that's the way I would use it, and aiming for the nose or something like that, you know.
So if you have something lightweight, like a trekking pole or a cane, they're designed to be light because people are carrying them long distance. Since you don't have that mass, it doesn't make as great of an impact weapon. So like a sling bang versus say like a baseball bat, right? The baseball bats are heavier, they got more mass to them, so there's more of an oomph when they make a contact, right? So if I had a trekking pole or a cane or something that was short and light, I would use it more as like a stabbing. I wouldn't try to beat the dog over the head with. Situationally dependent. That's all I can do, then that's all I can do, right? But that's going to be my goal, is to poke at the dog, because he's going to go urch, as if I'm shoving something in his face, it's going to cause him to stop his charge and want to try to work around it, right? Now, all I have to do is pivot. He's got to run all the way around me if he wants to get from behind me, right? Or continue an attack from the side. Very seldom where dog's going to want to attack you straight on. We covered that a little bit earlier. They're mostly going to want to try to get around to the sides or behind you. If a dog is trying to attack you straight on, great. You don't have to pivot and turn. But that's how you keep your advantage. Don't try to run away at this point. Again, now we're assuming that the fight is going to happen, that you have no other options, right? Because you didn't avoid it, like he was saying, ABCs, right? You didn't avoid it and you weren't able to bolt for whatever reason. So now we're saying the fight is going to happen. So at this point in time, if all I got is that stick, I'm just going to try to keep poking it at him. Keep a good hold on it, because if he bites it, he's going to try to thrash with it, right? And you're going to want to pull it back out of his mouth and poke him again. But so what I'm getting at is the tool that you have kind of dictates how to use it. So I'm going along with what you were saying. Practice. Absolutely. If you're not familiar with, say, stick defense or impact tools or whatever, you could probably find a local martial artist studio somewhere. Kempo, Kempo or NPO. Kempo is one that focuses on weapons quite a bit. There are other styles out there, but pretty much anybody who's in that genre, if they teach weapons, then they could probably show you a lot of tricks on how to defend against a dog with whatever tool that you have. So if you don't know, YouTube is a great resource. You can learn anything on YouTube. So there are things there, but then there's also your local. Nothing beats hands-on instruction. So if you have a local martial arts studio, I don't care. You're not going to need a whole lot of this. You're just going to need to go talk to them and say, this is what I'm concerned about. Here's the tool I have. How best should I do this? How best should I avoid one dog or fight against one dog? How best should I fight against multiple dogs, right? Would there be any differences? Focus on the one dog first, because most of your attacks are going to be one-on-one. So have him focus on that first, show you how to defend against the dog with the weapon of your choice, with the tool of your choice. And then after you've got that down and you kind of understand where he's getting at with that, then say, okay, now if there's multiple dogs, would you change anything that you're doing? Baseball bats are great, but I heard, you can probably speak to this better than I can, I heard that in the UK, baseball bats are seen as a weapon, and so you can't just walk around with a baseball bat. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, the UK, you
I
can't
saw a video
you
online.
can't use a potato as a self-defense weapon.
Really?
Anything you use that's not you for self-defense is classed as a weapon for defense. Like if you picked up a blade of grass and threw it fast enough at someone and injured them because of you trying to self-defense, it'd be classed as an offensive weapon. It's a nanny state, almost as much as Austria.
Yeah, man, for sure. Almost as much as Austria?
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that about Austria.
Yeah. Oh my. Well, they do let you buy rifles.
Saying
that's the.
Say again.
They do have. They're actually the most gun-free state in Europe, but apart from that, they're really nanny state.
I thought that was Switzerland.
Maybe
Hmm.
I could go and buy
So
a high powered rifle without hardly any checks there, which is kind of strange because they were trying to force a vaccine on us.
yeah. Hmm.
Whether you're pro vaccine or not, I still that opens up a whole can of pain to society there.
Well, again, right? It should be a personal decision whether you're pro vaccine or not. I don't. There was a thing a while back where people were saying, "Get the government out of my body, hands off my body," that kind of thing. Yeah, what happened to that? But anyway, we're getting off into the weeds,
The dog's getting anxiety.
right?
Oh, I can't hardly laugh. My ribs sore
She
from
wants me to
boxing, man.
throw the ball. She came up here and dropped her ball on the deck, and then she's run back there like, "Hey, throw the ball, Let's see. So back to all the way back to A. If we can go back to that for a minute, the you were asking about the predictabilities. What I use to see if a dog's going to be a problem or not.
Yep.
I can size a dog up not quite as fast, but relatively close to the speed that they can size me up in. Just because I've been around them my whole life and I've dealt with aggression for 20 years. The normal person isn't going to be able to do that. So I go back to women and your intuition. If the hair on the back of your neck stands up, don't do it. Don't go. Avoid it, right? But the average person is not going to be able to size up a dog that quickly. Assertiveness in a dog oftentimes, a lot of time, a massive amount of times, looks like aggression to an untrained eye. You get assertiveness when a dog is wanting to defend his territory and he's putting himself between you and his property, the kid that is out, the child that's in his family and his pack that's playing in the backyard. That's assertiveness. That's different than aggression. Aggression, you don't typically see from an outsider. You don't typically see actual aggression when the dog is on his own property, unless you are doing something. And that could just be being too close and walking by. If the owners are not teaching, and this is another thing we do very, very poorly, we don't teach our dogs the boundaries of our property. And so what happens is the dog goes and pees on a bush 5 feet off of our property. Then he goes and pees on a bush 10 feet off of our property, right? He's claiming that property. He's saying this is our area. And so what that can lead itself to, again, going back to dogs not getting enough exercise or training, what that can lend itself to is the dog thinking this whole street is mine, baby. So he's going to
I've
defend it
never
all,
thought of
right?
that. I always let my dog pee everywhere.
Most city dogs, it's just a signpost just saying, hey, I've been here. That's fine if it's a block down the road from your property, right? But when it's right off of your property, he's letting the neighborhood know this is our area, it's our territory. And so that can gradually increase. There was a Mastiff. Was it a Mastiff? Man, I'm trying to remember. It was a Mastiff. My wife's saying yes, it was. It was a Mastiff that we worked with for a little while that had actually taken over his neighbor's property. And his neighbor came home from work, and the Mastiff wouldn't let him go into his own house.
It's hilarious.
And it's all because of that whole thing. Nope, this ain't your home. This is our home, right? So the dog had claimed it. So that can happen. So when you're walking down a street, especially like in the video with the alleyway, I guarantee that dog had claimed that whole alley. He was out and about, which means if he was fenced in, he knew how to get out of the fence. So he'd been running around peeing on all of that stuff, right? He didn't just miraculously get out of the fence at that moment in time. He had been doing it for a long enough period of time that he felt that was his territory. And there's enough activity on streets and stuff that dogs can get crazy with passerbys. So think of the postman. He comes by, rattles and makes some noise, and then he leaves. Right? Postal route carriers get bit by much higher percentage than the normal Joe walking down the street. So why is that? That is because they are going into an area. The dog barks at them. That's the warning, right? The dog rushes up to the fence. That's warning number 2. He's like, the only reason I'm not on you is because there's a fence physically between us, right? Now, whether he would have just gone up there and been assertive, or whether he would have been aggressive, we don't know, because there's a fence in the way. So so the route carrier, the postal carrier, goes up, and when that dog is, if you back up again, if you are in a neighboring territory that is not yours, you should be quiet. This is the way the dog's thinking. You should be quiet. You should be respectful. And when you're not, that's indicative of a threat that he needs to be aware of and he needs to address. Okay? That's the dog psychology part of it. So the route carrier goes in. Loud trucks, usually they're not quiet little vehicles, right? A lot of them, back in the day, they were all diesels. Over here, I think they've switched, but regardless, they have that sliding door. They sling that open. That's got a bunch of noise. They walk out, right, and they rattle a mailbox or rattle a slot in the door of the main door of the house, whatever, and then they turn around and they leave. So the dog gets all of that excitement, that energy built up, and then he can't do nothing about it. And then he gets all that excitement built up tomorrow, and he can't do nothing about it. Meanwhile, the owners aren't taking the dogs out for walks. They're not training the dogs. They're not socializing the dogs, right? This happens all the time. And then eventually, a dog gets loose. Or the homeowner goes out the front door to grab the mail, and the dog comes rushing out behind him, right? And the homeowner, oh, don't worry, my dog don't bite. Your dog don't bite you. Don't mean he ain't going to bite me. If a dog has teeth, the dog will
reminds
bite.
me of that movie Jack Reacher, where the supposed that
Jack
reminds me of the
Reacher,
movie Jack Reacher, where yeah, that reminds me of the movie Jack Reacher, where the sniper allegedly was not able to shoot anybody because of the training, and then one day he just like shot like 5 people just to get out of his system, even though the guy was innocent. But
yeah, for sure. So there's a lot of that, right? With the anxiety. So there was a German Shepherd. Folks, the homeowners had called me. He wasn't getting out for walks or any of that. But they're like, I don't know what's going on. They had a fenced-in backyard, nice square right out of the back, but there was nothing in it. There was no trees. There was no flower bed. It was just grass. It was about as plain as you can get.
Not good.
And they would let the dog out, and the dog would run circles as he's running the fence. So he would kind of do this, right? It looked like he was chasing his tail as he's, normally when dogs run the fence, they get a game trail and it's about 6 inches wide, right? This guy's game trail was at least double that because he's spinning the whole time. And so we go into a lot of things trying to figure out what the heck it is. I always defer back to exercise. So that's my go-to. Exercise and diet. Diet can cause aggression. Diet can cause a lot of problems. So we look over the food they have. They had them on, I don't remember what it was, but they had them on a decent enough food. And so we go into exercise, and it's like, okay, I need to go do some digging because I haven't seen this symptom before. I haven't seen a dog present himself like this. So while I'm gone this next week, I want you to take him to the vet, just get a clean bill of health on him, make sure he doesn't have some sort of bacterial or viral impact in his brain, right? Because that can cause some weird stuff. And I want you to walk him, and I want you to walk him a lot. So when you walk him or run him or bike him or whatever, when they've got that much energy, when they are dragging and their tongue is dang near on the sidewalk, that's your halfway point. That's when you turn around and come back. That's not the dog's over. So you do that kind of intense exercise or amount of exercise when the dog has been neglected for a long period of time. And part of the reason you do that is the next day their muscles are going to be a little sore like ours would be. So it's going to slow them down. They're going to want to recoup. Well, no, guess what? Tomorrow we're doing it again. Right. And so you're able to get that energy out of them faster. 3 days later, whatever, 3-4 days later, short week, she calls me back and says, hey, he's not doing it anymore. It was all based on lack of exercise. This woman, again, they had a big house, probably 5,000-6,000 square feet, and they had a big backyard. So they thought he's getting plenty of exercise because he's got all of this room that he can run around and do things in. But because he wasn't getting out and doing other things, he wasn't getting to sniff, see new sights, excuse me, then he was essentially going crazy because he wasn't doing anything. And it all becomes a kennel to them, right? We mentioned that earlier. I don't care how big and fancy your house or your property is. If the dog's not getting off of your property to go experience new things, that property is going to eventually just become a kennel to him. So he has to get off the property and go do new things. Oh, my wife wrote down treadmill training. So if you are limited in your physical abilities, or like up here, it's 40 below, for a few months. The coldest I've seen on my property is 72 below Fahrenheit. You're not going to do a whole lot of walking with the dog at that point. So treadmills come in great. And there's videos on how to do that. And every dog has their own amount of energy. Some dogs hate it, but you can force the dog into it, make them get on the treadmill and go with you. You can walk with them on it. And we had a dog that loved it. We had Nikita, and we'd get up and come down in the morning and he'd be sitting on the treadmill. He'd just be like, hey, turn it on. And so we would turn it on and he would do his little trot while we were getting breakfast ready and everything. 5-10 minutes later, he'd just jump off of it. He was done. He was good. But that was how he got that itch out of him. And you don't have to drain all of their energy every day, but you've got to drain that excess energy every day. Does that make sense?
That's a fantastic idea, using that treadmill. I mean, our German Shepherd is really big and heavy, so like I can actually outrun my German Shepherd. Believe it or not, it's just he's such a thick.
Is he fat?
No, he's not fat. He's got such a thick. His coat is so thick
so
that
you
in
can
the
see his
summertime
ribs?
that he's just panting quite a lot of the time. So he just gets warm and so.
Yeah. So heat stroke is a thing to think about too with dogs, right? They can get that heat exhaustion or heat stroke. So definitely pay attention to that. If you're doing it every day, you don't have to do as intense, right? Because you're doing it every day. If somebody doesn't want to walk with their dog, they shouldn't own a dog. Just point blank. If you were maybe your health, you can't do it. But if you can't get your dog out to do new things, give your dog up. Give it to a friend, family member that can do it. Hire a dog walker to come over and walk your dog every day. Do something because your dog has to get out and do that. Smell new things, get that mental stimulus that they're not going to get within your home. And if you do that every day, you don't have to do it. It's not near as difficult to handle the dog, to teach the dog, to train the dog. Just they become normal, right? If they have excess energy, I'm sorry if I'm shaking the table. If they have excess energy, they just can't think. It's like a teenage boy and he's only thinking about one thing, right? That's them, not necessarily that thing, but that's them. They can't focus on anything. So you can't train them. You can't socialize them. You can't do anything like that. Which brings me up to dog parks. A lot of people take their dogs to dog parks, these, off leash fenced in areas. I assume you have them over there. No? Okay. So they have over here, they have them. They're very common. There'll be a fenced in area, and a lot of times there'll be like obstacles in there, things for them to run over, tubes for them to run through, whatever, just to go play. A lot of people get their dogs out there for exercise. No. You exercise your dog and then take it to the dog park. That way they can think through things. So take your dog on a run, a walk, whatever. Have them run off to the side of you if you've got a bicycle. Get that energy out of them, and then take them to the dog park. Dog parks are for socialization. They are not for exercise. Dog park fights happen in dog parks all the time because dogs are wound up. And if a dog's in there and he's kind of a dominant type dog and he's in the dog park and he's chilling, he's doing whatever, and then some dog comes in and he's all cocky with his tail up and he's just like, you have very high potential for a dog fight there. If a dog doesn't have all that extra energy, he's going to be less cocky when he goes into places, like the dog park.
We sometimes see this pit bull
Yeah. So,
that there's some neighbor around here has a pit bull, and I made a mistake once of letting our dog go up and sniff this pit bull. Pit bull just immediately bites it in its nose. It's like I'm glad I wasn't the leader in that situation there, but its tail was up as well. Just scary dogs, like there's quite when you walk
mm-hmm.
past its gate, our dog will go up to it, and then others pit bull was completely silent. There's immediately just power there. So that's the scariest type of dog to me. Not the one that barks a lot, the one that's just like immediately go and attack.
Yeah, for sure. So dogs have a series of signs that they'll go through, right? The first is that they notice you. Then their ears will perk up, right? So German Shepherds have ears that stand up on their own, but Labs and stuff, their ears flop down, but you'll see their corners of their ears will kind of come up and they'll come out a little bit. So they'll kind of do one of these numbers, right? Kind of look like a moose there, didn't it? Woo! They go from noticing you to standing up. You'll see them get real erect. Their tail will come up. Think of their tail like a thermometer. The higher that tail is, the more hot-headed they are, right? The more cocky they are, whatever. The more assertive they're trying to present themselves. Sometimes that's done out of fear. Sometimes that's done out of actual confidence and assertiveness. Yes, Izzy, you're a sweetheart. They'll, not to the same extent that a cat will, but they'll arch their back and they'll try to make themselves look bigger. They'll stand forward on their toes, kind of, like a boxer, right? He's not sitting back on his heels. He's kind of forward on his toes, on his feet. They'll do all of those signs. They'll put themselves sideways so that they look bigger. If I look head on to a dog, he looks smaller than if I see him sideways, right? So they'll be sideways, kind of looking at you like that. All of those body language cues are telling you that he's seeing you as a threat for that moment. Doesn't mean he's going to attack, but it doesn't mean he ain't going to either, right? The body posturing comes, and then you'll usually hear a growl, some teeth baring, right? After, and sometimes, not every dog, but sometimes they'll give warning bites into the air, right? That'll usually come after the growl or whatever. Now, this is assuming they're not just running at each other. This is assuming like they're, you're meeting him or he's meeting you, and he's just trying to figure out what's going on. That's assertiveness. That is not aggression. Even the biting at the air is assertiveness. It's not aggression. It could be fear driven, or it can just be straight assertiveness. The proper answer to that is turn around and walk away, or back off slowly. Maybe not turn around, but back off slowly. Talk to the dog in a calming voice, right? It's okay, bud. Yep, we're out of here, bud. It's all good. It's all good. We're gone. That kind of a thing, right? Almost every dog has a nickname, and it's either Buddy or Bubba or something like that, or Sweetie or something, right? So if you call just about any dog Buddy, hey, buddy, almost every dog owner has. I had 3 dogs just perk their head up when I said that. Almost every dog owner
buddy,
says
buddy,
something
buddy,
like
buddy.
that to their dog. Almost every dog owner says something like that to their dog. So you're not going to know the dog's name, right? But the dog knows their name. But they also know that they get called by other things. So if you say, it's okay, buddy, it's okay, and then you back off, it's all good, right? That's kind of the best way to do it. After the teeth growl, usually it's growling and then it's teeth, but sometimes it's the other way around. If they're gonna bite at the air, that usually follows the teeth and the growling. That's your last warning. So if the dog is growling at you in a low rumble and or baring its teeth at you, that's your last warning. Next thing is a bite. The dog doesn't want to fight you at that point in time. Otherwise, he wouldn't give you all of those signs, right? So that's the time to back off. When they were breeding, you were talking about pit bulls. That's what got me on this track. When they were breeding fighting dogs, it became pit bulls. But earlier than that, there was wolves involved. There was Rotties involved, yada, yada. But let's just go to pits. selectively breed the dogs for two things. Well, three things: dog aggression, human non-aggression. So if you think about a dog fight, the dog fight can go on for hours, right? But there's going to be humans in there that have to take the dog out, have to pull them off of each other or whatever. So you don't want a human aggressive dog fighter or fighting dog. You want a dog aggressive one. Okay. So they breed them to be dog aggressive and human friendly. And then they also breed them, they specifically breed the dogs that go through all of those signs the fastest, or sometimes skip over those signs. There's always some sort of indicator before a dog attacks, especially before a dog attacks a human. There's always some sort of indicator. The dog never just pops off. It does not happen. So we as humans need to get good at recognizing dog behavior and dog body language. What is the dog trying to tell? Because they don't speak English, at least last time I checked. So we have to know what they're meaning by what they're saying, right? Most dogs give you a choice to leave the situation first. But pit bulls, especially with other dogs, won't. Or other fighting breeds, gladiator breeds, I call them. A lot of times they won't give you the option to leave. They will just straight up attack because that's their instinct. That's what they were bred to do. And if you got, let's say, a pit, because we're talking about them, if you've got a pit bull and he's not getting exercise and he's not getting socialized, he's going to tend towards his instincts, which is dog aggression, right? The socialization is key, probably second most important after exercise. Exercise is absolutely the most important thing you can do with your dog. Daily exercise, some sort of exercise. I'm going to go on a little soapbox here, but playing fetch with your dog is not exercise in that sense. It is, but if that's all you ever do with the dog, that's how you create an obsession with a dog. So these dogs that just can't see anything but the tennis ball, their physical outlet and their mental outlet has been the same thing day in and day out every day. That's how you create an obsessed dog. The only thing that they want is a tennis ball, let's say. If you throw a stick, don't care about the stick. All I want is that tennis ball. That's an obsession that we create in our dogs by making their physical outlet and their mental outlet the same thing all the time. So it's got to change up, right? Just walking the dog changes their mental outlet because there's different smells, there's different sights, right? So you're not going to create a dog who's obsessed with walking, let's say, by walking your dog. But if their physical exercise is the same as their mental, you will. And those are so hard to break. Once that obsession is in there, it would take an expert, sometimes months, to break that obsession. We worked with one. How long did it take me to get Cannon's tennis ball obsession? 6 months? Yeah. Daily working with this dog, daily physical exercise, daily mental exercises, no tennis balls allowed. And it took me roughly 6 months to break him of his. And that's somebody who knows what he's doing it, right? Yeah. Don't allow your dog to get an obsession. All right. So we were talking about fighting, weren't we?
Yeah. So
Okay,
fighting, the human body without any tools or weapons is pathetically ill-prepared to cope with any mid-sized upwards dog. Full stop,
And depending on the person's physical and, let's say, mental abilities, even a small dog can create a serious problem.
Really?
I've seen Jack Russell Terriers tear people up. And
really?
It's because so you've heard of the fight or flight scenario, right? People either fight or they run away. There's a third one that most people you don't ever hear about, but like 80% of the population does, and that's the freeze. So there's actually fight, flight, or freeze.
Uh-huh.
When you freeze, we were talking about that ODA loop before. Sometimes when that loop gets broken, They get broken usually in the first two O's, the observe and the orientate. They just can't get their brain to think, because a lot of times this is because they've never thought of these scenarios to begin with. So they can't get past the, is that really a threat or not? That is a threat. Is it really? What do I do? I don't know. They can't get to the decision part, and so they just freeze. Sometimes they'll just freeze and scream. Sometimes they'll not even say a word. They'll just, kids are notorious for that, especially little boys. They'll just, and not do anything, like tensed up every muscle in their body, and they're essentially just waiting to get the snot beat out of them. Little girls are usually really good at screaming. Even if you're screaming, you can engage that prey drive even further. But the freezing is primarily because you've never thought about it or trained it in your life. So back to what you were saying earlier about training with your weapon, you got to train without weapons. You got to think about these things. You should, when you go to walk your dog, constantly engage yourself on every walk at least a couple of times. Okay, if a dog was to run up behind us right now, what would I do? If a dog was to run out in front of me right now, what would I do? Just let your brain think about those things while you're out on your walks. I don't care if you walk the same path every day. There was one person in that comment string that talked about that, walking the same path every day. Well, guess what? Bad dogs migrate. Bad dogs go through good neighborhoods. There's also the potential for what we were talking about earlier with the postman. You could basically be a postman walking your dog, stirring up a neighbor's dog and not even realizing it, right? And then all of a sudden that dog gets out. Or the dog comes to the fence and they're barking and you just keep right on walking, right? It's still building that anxiety within the dog. So it doesn't have to be the postman, right? It can be you, and your dog could be acting like the postman, creating that same anxiety and desire to settle the situation within that dog. Desire for the dog to settle the situation.
Man,
So
my walks are going
then
to
they
be
get
completely
out.
different now. Like this
Mhm.
this layer of it's sort of going to really increase the interestingness of my walks, having all this extra layers of
Well, good.
understanding, you know.
Yeah, so the dogs, I think I've said it before, but dogs can't pick up a book and read about us, right? So we kind of have to understand how they think and why they think the way they do. And we also have to understand, I say take it for granted that the owner is not going to be exercising his dog, is not going to be training his dog, is not going to be socializing his dog. So just assume that, so that you're erring on the conservative side, so to speak, right? If you do walk the same path every day and you have a dog that is running up to the fence and barking and so on, I call it cage rage, where they just get to the edge of the fence, right? Try to, so in that comment string, there was a mail carrier, a rural route carrier that I was talking to, and I suggested this to him: try to go over to those homes when the homeowner's there. Talk to the homeowner and say, hey, I walk this thing every day. I'm causing your dog a lot of stress. I'm just wondering, can I meet your dog so I can meet them with the homeowner, right? Not have the homeowner invite you into their home or into their backyard, because dogs will act differently when their owners are present versus when they're not, especially if they're a defensive minded dog, right? So you don't want to do this on your own. You want to do it with the dog owners present, and then you can meet the dog. And if that goes well enough, maybe you can introduce your dog, right? At some point in time. Maybe it's just on the weekends. Maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be like this long, drawn out doggy play date or anything like that. But odds are that dog isn't getting the exercise that he's requiring daily. The other possibility is when we leave, dogs will do one of two things. They'll go on a heightened sense of defense, or they'll sleep all day. We have both here. The Shepherd Malamute mix that we have, he goes on patrol. He does it at night and he does it when we're gone. If we don't kennel him, he's constantly walking around making sure everything's tight and right. the Goldens that you've seen, they just go to bed. They just sleep. They don't care, right? So there's differences within the breeds that way. If your dog is a heightened defensive dog and you try to, or if the dog, not your dog, but the dog is, and you try to go introduce yourself, reach over the fence and play, there's a good chance you're going to get bit, right? And then that's not the dog's fault. That's yours as the human. But a lot of things, a lot of municipalities or whatever, and people will say, well, the dog bit you, so it shouldn't bite a human, regardless of what the human's doing. It shouldn't bite it. So now you got to put the dog down, right? So some people will do that. That doesn't happen very much anymore. I think we're starting to become more educated with dogs and dog behavior. But there is that, even within the American Humane Society, there is that the dog bit someone or something, so it has a bite history. So now it's either going to get put down or it's, has to be contained in some sort of other way. So do your introductions with the homeowner there. And let's say it's a husband and wife. Typically, this is not every time, but typically the husband tends to be more of the domineering, the dominant one of the two, of the husband and wife combo, and the dog will tend to listen to the husband more than the wife, especially in a situation where the dog is anxious or scared or whatever. So find out which owner the dog listens to better. So, I mean, we've got a dog here. Tank is his name. He loves my bride. Loves her. He will listen to her regardless of what's going on. I have to really get after him for him to listen to me, right? So if that was the situation with him, then I would have you meet my wife and your dog, not necessarily me and my dog. So find that out. And it would probably be better for both of them to be home. But as long as the one that he respects the most, that he sees as the alpha, is, as long as that person is home, then you should be okay. And that's just preventative measure, right? To meet the dogs on your walk. And then as you go by, you can talk to them again. And kind of reassure them that it's you. That is that's a huge step.
I enjoy going up to neighbours' dogs and seeing them go mad at the fence, and our dog also loves going winding up the dogs as much as possible. The fence, growling at them and all this stuff.
Yeah, well, as long as there's no hole in the fence or that dog don't get out, you're fine, I guess. But
we have one street
there's
here.
Potential, right?
That's happened a couple of times, and it's typically these smaller dogs, and they just run up straight to our German Shepherd and bite him. It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
So that is the owner. So depending on the breed, let's think about Dachshunds for a second, or Chihuahuas. They're bred to go underground and fight rats and mice and kill those things, right? That's what they were bred to do. So there is an innate aggression in those types of dogs. So that has to be, through socialization and training, that has to be controlled, right?
This was Cocker Spaniel and also a small pointer that bit our dog. They got out the gate.
Okay, so those are bird dogs. Yeah, so those are bird dogs. Bird dogs always have a high prey drive, and Spaniels in particular have a really high energetic level. So I can almost guarantee that dog's not getting the exercise and the socialization that's supposed to happen.
I've never seen that dog in They don't think that a dog is like 3 or 4 times the weight of these dogs. Like, and it just...
Yeah, it don't matter. And so it doesn't matter for a couple of reasons. Number one, I said earlier, the same instincts, the same mindset that the Rottweiler has, the Chihuahua has as well. He's still a predator. Okay, he still shows that same thing. So what I tell people is, if you wouldn't want a 150-pound Rottweiler doing it, don't let your Chihuahua do it. But so it's the same mindset, and you get these owners that think it's funny because their little dog, their 5-pound, 10-pound, whatever dog, is bossing around these big ones. Well, that's all well and good until the big one decides to answer back, right?
Yeah.
It would take your dog about a half a second to cause some serious problems on those little dogs. And then what do they say? They say, well, it's your dog that was the problem. right? Because it's a bigger dog, and he really seriously injured them when they were just nipping at his heels or whatever. They weren't being aggressive. No, that's aggression. That little dog nipping at your big dog's heels is aggression. He's trying to control that dog. He's trying to boss it around. And if your dog, the bigger dog, decides he doesn't want that to happen, it ain't going to take him very long to make it not happen. There was a video walking in the street of a city. There was, I believe it was a German Shepherd, but don't quote me on that. And then there was a little, I think it was a Yorkie coming the other way. Well, the Yorkie was doing that cocky out in front of the parents' walk, or out in front of the owner's walk, right? And he started trying to boss the German Shepherd around, like nipped at him and everything. The German Shepherd turns around and grabs it and just picks it up. Now, if he'd have wanted to kill the thing, it would have been done and over with right there. But he didn't kill it. He just mouthed it. And I don't even think he punctured it, right? But he's just like, what the heck are you doing, right? And then the owners come up and they're all freaking out and they're mad at the German Shepherd owner. And the German Shepherd owner had his dog on a leash and he's right there, right? But the other dog's owner, I don't remember if they were on a leash or if they were on one of those really long, like retractable leashes. I don't remember exactly, but they were a ways away comparatively. And it took them a minute to get up there. But yeah, it was just that. It's like you're just lucky the German Shepherd didn't want to hurt your dog, because he could have very, very quickly. So anybody who says my dog doesn't bite, or who thinks it's funny that their little dog bosses around the big dogs, avoid those people like the plague. Or, I mean, if they're friends of yours, try to teach them maybe a little bit, but those are usually the worst dog owners, those types of people. And I got more scars on my hands from Chihuahuas, Yorkies, and Dachshunds than anything else. There's nowhere you can grab a hold of a Chihuahua. He can't turn around and get you, right? Especially when you got meat hooks for hands. And so, yeah, thankfully, I've only been bit a couple of times by big dogs. But sometimes, yeah, most of the time it's fear. But, there's been a couple, like the Chow was a fear aggression. But I'm also a lot more careful when I'm dealing with a big dog versus a little dog. Their little dog's teeth are usually sharper so they can penetrate really quickly. But they don't have near the amount of muscle, obviously, that a big dog does, so they can't hurt you as bad, right? A little super glue, pinch it together, put a little super glue on it, and it'll heal back up. But there's a lot of that just because of how bendy those little dogs are and how little they are and how big, a hand is in comparison. When you're working with aggression rehab, you have to take physical control of the dog. There's different techniques for that, but you have to be able to do that. So when you're doing that with the dog, a little dog, they're going to get you. There's just no way around it. Sometimes. Where are we going next?
Well, I think this has been fine for my first education on dogs, and I'm going to put all this stuff into practice. And I think I'll.
So there. Go ahead.
It'll be good to do another one in a few weeks or something like that, and I'll let you know what I figured out.
Yeah, we certainly could. There's things I wanted to touch on, like the 3 tones of voice, 2 command rules, stuff like that. So I think it would be beneficial for your audience to do a second one.
Cool.
If you want.
How can people get in touch with you, Adam?
Grandpa's Retirement Acres is probably best. The video itself that we are discussing was called How to Defend. What was it called here? How to Defend Against Dog Attack. Not against a dog attack, but against dog attack. And it was by Athletic Engineering or something to that effect.
I'll leave a link
in the comment string
video.
there. Okay, yeah. So in the comment string there, you can reply to the comment and I'll get it there. My wife is on Facebook, baby. Facebook and Instagram. Facebook and Instagram under that Grandpa's Retirement Acres. Again, just search that name, whatever platform you use, that little logo, and you should be able to find us there. And you can ask a question that way, or tell me how wrong I am, and I'll get back in touch with you as soon as I can. Again, living in Alaska, I'm not on the computers or internet webs and stuff all the time, so there could be a week or 2 delay there, but I'll get back in touch with you as soon as I can.
Well, Adam, this is a very rich conversation. I'm going to keep digging and probably watch this about 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Thanks very much for taking your time and explaining everything so clearly and sharing your world-class knowledge on dogs, and more valuable to me than watching these videos on Pet Detector and Pet Whisperer and all this stuff. This is real stuff, you know.
For sure, yeah. If I could say one more thing, if you're being attacked by a dog, watch your tone of voice. When humans get scared, we tend to raise our voice up to a higher level. Get out of here, whatever, especially females. A lot of times females talk in that tone, right? And when they get scared, it's even more. If you cannot, it's better not to say, it's just as good not to say anything as it is to yell at the dog. So practice on keeping your tone of voice low. So think about being pulled over by the police officer, and he's not, he's in command, right? So his voice is low. He's not talking in that kind of a tone of voice. If you're a female, or let's say a male with a high pitched voice, just your conversational tone is going to be in an elevated tone or an elevated octave. That elevated octave increases the prey drive in the dog. So if you can't lower your voice, don't say anything. Bare your teeth and growl at the dog instead of trying to say anything. You're going to be better off than trying to command the dog in a scared and excited tone of voice. And I think we could leave it there. I just wanted to throw that part out there because it's very, very important.
Okay, well, Adam, thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon. And thanks everybody for watching and listening to this episode of the Nikos Show. See you later.
All right, buddy. Thanks. Take care.